First, let's start with this case. My brother and his fiancée, Beck, are getting married soon. For context, we all live overseas. They're in Belgium, I'm in the United States, and our family is from New Zealand. This wedding has been postponed before due to unrelated reasons, but they've now decided to have the ceremony back in New Zealand. Earlier this year, my mom offered to help with wedding arrangements since my brother and Beck are overseas. However, my brother told her that Beck wanted to organize everything herself as a surprise for everyone. We received a virtual invitation but weren't given details about themes or colors. When we asked about dress guidelines, the only response was, "Just don't wear anything whitish." Fast forward to this week. My cousin, who was only asked to be a bridesmaid last week, was told today about the bridesmaid dress color. She immediately informed Beck that my mom had already purchased a dress in that same color. Beck asked her to tell my mom to change her dress. I told my mom she doesn't need to change her dress, and I mentioned that my dress is also the same color, just in a slightly different tone. At this point, it's too late for us to make any changes. My brother sent a text to our family group chat today informing us of the bridesmaid color and politely requesting that we avoid wearing it. I responded, explaining that we already had our dresses and that it was too late to change them. I also reminded him that we had asked several times about the colors beforehand, but hadn't been given any guidance. He seemed to understand and said it was fine, leaving it at that. Later, my cousin told us that Beck had called her, desperate and crying in rage. She accused us of trying to sabotage her wedding. We also found out that Beck had only decided to ask the bridesmaids to wear a specific color last week. Apparently, one of the bridesmaids had already bought a dress, and instead of asking her to choose a different color or make another adjustment, Beck decided it was easier to ask my mom to change her dress. Am I wrong for standing by our decision not to change my mom's dress or mine, and instead going forward with what we've already planned? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Beck needs to grow up. Changing vote to, "You're not in the wrong." Now there's new information. The bride doesn't have bridesmaids, and the maid of honor is wearing a different color. Toss in the mauve dress was made by an aunt, and there isn't time to change, and it's a no-brainer. So this is a non-issue now. Wear the dresses. She doesn't get to play mysterious mysteries and then cry foul when the NPCs screw up the storyline/aesthetic. But you have enough time to arrange a new dress. You haven't said yours has had special fittings. A dress is a dress is a dress. I am sure you can buy a similar dress in a different color. And you are telling your mom what to do. Stay out of that. Leave it to her to decide for herself. You're not in the wrong. Honestly, putting aside Beck's ridiculous behavior and the fact that she left her choices for her bridal party to the last minute, you'd still be. You're not in the wrong. It's your brother's wedding, not some distant cousin or friend of the family. You and your mom are immediate family. There's no reason at all why you shouldn't be wearing some version of the same color as the bridal party. In fact, lots of people do that on purpose with the mother of the bride, etc. Next up, after using an iPhone SE for 4 years and other iPhones before that, I, 22F, recently decided to buy an Android phone, Samsung A25. This decision stemmed from several reasons, but primarily due to storage issues and concerns about my privacy. One significant factor was my mother's use of the Find My app from Apple. While I understand it helps her feel more relaxed, it often felt intrusive. For example, if my phone battery died and my location appeared stuck overnight at a shopping mall, it would cause her considerable anxiety, even leading to digestion problems. Unfortunately, I can't disable location tracking on my iPhone because I don't know the Apple ID password. Only my parents do, and they won't share it for this exact reason. Feeling that I'm old enough to live without constant supervision, I decided to switch to an Android phone. I spoke to my father about the decision today, and he didn't seem pleased. In fact, I am the first person in my family to use an Android instead of an iPhone, and this change has created some logistical challenges. For instance, we now have to transfer all my data, and my mother may experience psychosomatic effects from not being able to track my location. It's worth noting that I'm a student and still depend on my parents for roughly half of my financial needs. This adds another layer of complexity to the situation, as they might view this decision as defiance or unnecessary rebellion. Am I wrong for buying an Android phone, even though it was primarily to establish more privacy and independence from my parents? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. You're an adult, even if you're still partially dependent on your parents because you're a full-time student. It's not normal or healthy to obsess over your location. And you and your dad should be gently guiding your mom towards professional psychiatric help for her anxiety. Set this boundary now so that your parents can get used to treating you like the adult you are, and they won't be learning to deal with this cold turkey when you graduate and presumably move out on your own permanently. Good luck, OP. Enabling doesn't actually help with her anxiety issues. She needs to work on the root of her issues, not track you, because clearly what she's been doing hasn't been helping, seeing as she still freaks out when your phone dies or is otherwise unable to accurately track you. Tracking you is just a band-aid. It doesn't actually solve her problems. She can't rely on stalking you for the rest of her life. You're an adult. You don't need to be tracked 24/7. I highly recommend working towards financial independence, because while you're within your rights to not want to be tracked, they're within their rights to not financially help you. You're not in the wrong. Your parents should not be tracking your location at that age. If your mother is claiming she literally worries sick about you, even though you're an adult and she can contact you whenever she wants, she's either not being totally honest or she should see a doctor. I have had psychosomatic anxiety in the past that caused gas, as well as joint pain and a feverish feeling. Now I'm on Prozac. It no longer happens. Hers seems more situational, and she just might need time to adjust, or to talk to her friends or a therapist. I know not everyone likes therapy, but it doesn't need to be a therapist. She talks this through with. If she knows other moms, they could probably reassure her that it's time you become independent. Either way, being a trigger for anxiety isn't really the same thing as causing it. Think PTSD. If someone honks their horn at a vet and she has an episode, they didn't cause that underlying condition and really have no control over how it flares up. Same deal here. Next up, my son was incredibly intelligent, smarter than me even. I used to joke about requesting a paternity test because he was so sharp. That's a joke, of course. When my ex-wife and I divorced, he was 12 years old. She remarried when he was 14, and I remarried when he was 16. Despite the changes in our family dynamics, I always maintained a close relationship with my son. In Canada, I had set up a Registered Education Savings Plan, RESP, for him. For those unfamiliar, an RSP is an education fund that can be used for post-secondary education-related expenses. I always told my son that he didn't have to go to university. If he chose not to, I joked that I'd use the money to fund a trip to Belgium to buy beer from monks who only sell one case at a time. He knew I was kidding, and he would play along, always refusing to let me rile him up. When he got accepted to McGill University, it was the proudest moment of my life. To celebrate, I took him out for a beer, both to toast his achievement and jokingly mourn the loss of my imaginary Belgium trip. In March, my son was struck and killed by a drunk driver. Losing him has been the most devastating experience of my life. My ex-wife and I are both trying to cope with the loss, and my current wife has been my rock through it all, holding me up when I feel like I can't stand on my own. While handling funeral arrangements, my ex-wife approached me about the RSP. She knew that my son had earned a scholarship, and his plan had been to use the RSP funds for living expenses and as an emergency fund while studying. She asked what I intended to do with the money now. I told her I planned to do what I had always joked about, take a trip to Belgium and drink beer in my son's honor. She then asked if she could use the funds for her stepson. While her husband is a decent person and provided for my son's basic needs when he lived with them, he had made it clear over the years that he wasn't responsible for anything beyond the essentials. I thought about it, but ultimately told her no. I didn't want the money to go towards someone who wasn't my son. Instead, I planned to use it for the trip, a way to honor the jokes my son and I shared and to create a bittersweet memory that ties me to him. My ex thinks I'm being stupid and irresponsible, saying I'm wasting thousands of dollars. She pointed out that the government portion of the recipe would need to be returned. She might be right, but I don't care. I know this may seem like a frivolous or selfish decision to some, but I believe my son would have laughed his head off knowing that I actually went through with our long-running joke. This isn't just about beer or a trip. It's about doing something that reminds me of him and keeps his spirit alive in a way only he and I would understand. So, am I wrong for not giving the resp to my ex-wife's stepson and instead choosing to honor my son's memory in this way? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Sorry for your loss. I thought it was a clickbait title, but this is a sad post. I hope you enjoy your trip and pour out some for your homie. It sounds like you guys had a good relationship. From someone who lost her 15-year-old sister to a car accident, this really tore me up way more than I thought it would. She was killed a month after her 15th birthday and had just been accepted to a private high school with a full-ride scholarship she had been trying for. The acceptance letter sat on her vanity in her room for years after. You're not in the wrong. If anything, far from it. The ex-wife even asking is a huge one. Please go to Europe and celebrate his life. It's the only thing that should be done with that money. If you have a Venmo, Cash App, etc., I would love to also buy you a beer. I'm truly sorry for your loss. You're not in the wrong. You're not wasting your money. You are celebrating your son's life and mourning your loss at the same time. I'm sorry for your loss, and I hope the trip is healing for you. Raise a glass to your son for all the internet strangers who are thinking of you. Next up, I, 35 Memon, have been married to my wife, 32F, for 5 years. Over the past few months, we've been struggling financially. I lost my job 3 months ago, and while I've found part-time work, it doesn't pay nearly as much as my previous job. Despite cutting back where we can, we've been living paycheck to paycheck and have even had to dip into our savings. Recently, my mom, 65, came over for a visit and noticed how stressed I was about our financial struggles. She offered some advice on ways to save money, such as cutting down on takeout, meal prepping, and switching to less expensive grocery brands. My mom raised me and my siblings on a tight budget and has always been frugal, so I figured her advice was worth considering. I asked if she'd be willing to review our spending habits and help identify areas where we could save. My wife agreed to this plan. My mom went all out and created a detailed spreadsheet of our expenses. It became clear that a significant amount of our spending was on non-essential fun items. For example, we were spending way too much on daily Starbucks trips, frequent takeout, and other luxuries. Most of these expenses were things my wife preferred, like organic produce, variety in weekly meals, and regular takeout. When we reviewed the spreadsheet, my wife didn't take it well. She argued with my mom, insisting that her approach was outdated and that her calculations were wrong. My wife said that we don't need to cut back on things like organic produce and variety in groceries, and she argued that takeout helps her feel less stressed. I tried to explain that sacrifices were necessary if we wanted to stabilize our finances. But she kept saying things weren't as bad as I thought, and that we should just ride it out. At this point, my mom decided to leave, sensing the tension. My wife and I continued arguing, and she doubled down on not giving up her takeout. She also kept criticizing my mom's suggestions. I lost my patience and snapped, saying, "You're wrong. My mom is right. She raised 3 kids on 1 income, and we can't even cut back on groceries for a few months?" My wife was visibly hurt and called me a jerk for siding with my mom. She said my mom's way of doing things doesn't work for us, and she feels like I'm putting her down. Since then, she's been barely speaking to me, and now I'm wondering if I went too far. Am I wrong for siding with my mom and snapping at my wife during the argument? Should I have approached this differently? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Your wife agreed to go through your budget with your mom. Your mom took the time and effort to review things, and then it sounds like your wife was very rude and dismissive. As far as I know, math hasn't changed that much in the last 30 years, so it's not clear how your mom's views are outdated. You're not in the wrong. Your wife wants to continue the lifestyle you had before you lost your job. She's closed to any compromise that could affect her lifestyle. She refuses to see how dire your financial situation is. She refuses to take any responsibilities. Your wife is okay with your mother's input only if your mother says what she wants to hear. Was the duck necessary? Probably not. But in this context, with the frustration building up, I can understand the word slipping here. So no, not the idiot, even with this word. I'd ask your wife, what are the solutions according to her then? If your mother is wrong and your wife is right, then ask her to explain to you how she is right. What solutions can she propose? Here are other things that you could tell her. Meal prep can be boring indeed, but instead of meal prep, you could ingredient prep, meaning that you could prep a bunch of ingredients that can be used in different recipes. There's a whole community on YouTube doing it and giving ideas, instead of her daily Starbucks. She could cut it down to once a week. The rest of the week, you could buy the ingredients that creates her mocha pumpkin spice with whipped cream and cacao powder coffee, and she could make it herself at home. Most of the time, it ends up 10x better and 10x less expensive. You could cut down the takeout at once a week and transforming it into a romantic night. Those are the solutions your mother told you already, but with a positive note added to it. Now, of course, your problem seems deeper than just trying to put everything into a positive perspective. Your wife is acting extremely childish. But for the problem at hand, I think it might work. As for your wife and her attitude, I'm kind of out of words here. Edit. I know, my comment is already long. I just read a few of your answers and god damn, you have a wife problem here. She refuses to work full-time because it's bad for her mental health? You lost your job. She needs to put more effort right now. That's what partnership is all about. She is extremely selfish and entitled. You don't just have a temporary financial problem, you have a full-time wife problem. She refuses to put any effort on every front of your relationship, as far as I know. She is waiting for you to do almost everything, financially speaking. This needs to be addressed more seriously. Her lack of responsibility and effort into this relationship is a huge red flag. You're not in the wrong, and your wife needs to learn the difference between a need and a want. She doesn't want to give up her luxuries. So evidently, Starbucks is more important than financial security. My husband and I are very frugal. I do not upgrade my phone until I have to. We only eat out for dinner once a week. We pack our lunches. We do not have designer, expensive clothes. I shop sales for everything. I plan my menu for the week around the sale ad. My husband and I make over $250,000 a year, and he wears Rural King jeans that cost $12.99. Because we do not need to impress anyone. I would rather have $3,000 in a $30 purse than a $3,000 purse with $30 in it. As a result, we can pay cash for items like cars, etc. We are set up well for retirement. It is called priorities. Paying $10 for a coffee during the week adds up to $50. That is $2,600 a year. That coffee tastes good. But when you can't pay your bills or have no money for emergencies or retirement, what are you going to do?